Let's make an Alfredo pasta sauce that is rich, creamy, and simple. And of course, the chicken will be moist and delicious. For the chicken, we'll start first with some adobo seasoning and then add some paprika to the small bowl, followed by some onion powder and then some garlic powder. The link in the description box below will detail exactly how much of everything I use. This recipe is actually one of my favorites. I love that it's extremely simple to make. It's guaranteed to give you a delicious and flavorful chicken. I go ahead and mix everything together and then set the bowl aside. I go ahead and pat dry my chicken breast because I want to make sure to remove any excess water or moisture. I usually like to cook with chicken thighs opposed to breast, but this time I'm using breast and I'll be sure to make sure that they stay moist in the oven. I first add some Caribbean green seasoning, and as I've said before, this is basically a paste made out of a collection of herbs and spices, and you can find it in a bottle at your local grocery store. It adds great flavor to the chicken. I go ahead and mix it all throughout, flip it over, and make sure it's evenly distributed on both sides of the chicken. I always like to add this Caribbean green seasoning first to coat the chicken before I add my spice mixture. Next, I go ahead and coat both sides of the chicken by generously sprinkling on the spice mixture. I have two fairly large pieces of chicken breast here, but you can adjust the spice level dependent on the size that you have. If your chicken breasts are rather small, you can go ahead and use a little bit less of the spice mixture. You can just use your discretion. For me, this amount of spice tends to be perfect for the size of chicken breast that I get. Last, I'll go ahead and drizzle on some vegetable oil just on the top of both pieces of chicken before I prepare to put it into the oven. I place the chicken into an oven that's been preheated to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. I allow it to cook uncovered until it's cooked all the way through. For me, this was approximately 30 minutes. You can see the juices coming from the chicken, and when you cut into it, you'll see that it's amazingly moist. The key is cook it only as long as you have to. If you stick a food thermometer inside, the internal temperature should be 165 degrees Fahrenheit. For my pasta, I go ahead and add a dash of salt to some boiling water and add my pasta of choice. For me, I'm going with spirals, but you can use whatever you choose. Next is the Alfredo sauce. I start by adding some butter to a pot. I usually use salted butter. I go ahead and allow it to melt, and then next I go ahead and add some minced garlic. Again, the description below will detail all of the proportions that I use. I go ahead and allow the garlic to cook just briefly because you don't want to allow it to burn. I just go ahead and mix it around in the butter. Then I go ahead and add some heavy whipping cream to the pot. I go ahead and mix everything around and allow it to boil and bubble ever so slightly. Then, after I let it sit for some additional time and I start to see it bubble some more, I go ahead and stir again and prepare to add my cheese. I usually use shredded Parmesan cheese. You can also use shaved. The only thing you have to be sure is don't ever use grated Parmesan cheese because the sauce won't form correctly with that. Either shredded or shaved Parmesan cheese is great. I add it simply in batches and go ahead and stir after each time just to make sure that it mixes pretty well. At this point, I start to stir the sauce pretty frequently just because I don't really want it to start to clump. I also start to turn down the heat once I notice that it starts to bubble and the cheese has mostly melted. I stir very frequently and I can see now that it's starting to take shape, but it's still a little bit runny. So I turn the heat to low to let it start to thicken. I go ahead and add a dash of salt here. You can do it per your taste. I stir again, and basically now you'll see that the sauce is pretty much done. I like my sauce this consistency, but you can always add a little bit additional cheese if you like. I go back and check on my pasta, and I allowed it to cook for as long as the package instructions said, and when I taste it, I see that this is perfect for me. And there you have it, my meal is done. I go ahead and dress the pasta with a little bit of the sauce. You see now it's really kind of started to thicken. I go ahead and add it on top, and before you know it, the meal is done. I usually like to plate the pasta with the sauce drizzled on top, but you can always choose to mix everything together in the pot if you like. In literally minutes, you have a great Alfredo chicken pasta recipe that's delicious, creamy, and simple. You can find the full recipe in the description box below. Be sure to check out more of our cooking videos here on YouTube.